roll call, Jamie?
I will momentarily.
Okay.
I just lost you all by hitting live stream. And now you're going to get a notification that we're recording. All right. Start with roll call. Noah Perlett,
Here.
Randy Hogan,
Here.
Chuck Spanger,
Here.
Pete Slavinsky.
Here.
All right. And joining us as guests are Rita Breton, our council liaison, April Seither, and Eric Sanderson, the town planner.
Welcome, Eric.
Thanks for having me.
Eric, do you have a picture? I've never seen you before.
I have my camera on.
Camera's on. It might
Oh,
just
there
not be
you are.
showing on your screen.
There you are.
You're not missing much,
You're a young fella.
relatively.
And Marla's just joined us. Welcome, Marla. I want to begin our time together with an acknowledgement honoring all Indigenous people, the people who came here before us and nurtured this place as stewards of Mother Earth, the first people. I make this acknowledgement aware that this land is unceded and that issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment upon sacred sites are ongoing in the Wabanaki homeland. I also want to acknowledge the Waskawa people who once lived in what is now Scarborough, and that as we support efforts for land and water protection, we honor the current tribes who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. So we have minutes that were circulated by Jamie, and I'll take a motion to approve. And then I have something to add in the middle of that.
I'll make that motion to approve those minutes, which, by the way, were very good.
Yeah, they're terrific. Yeah.
She's
Seconded.
excellent at that. One note that I want to add is that we wanted to circulate a report of our Chuck and my time at the Maine Conservation Commission conference. So that'll be sent. It was noted in the minutes that it was attached. It'll be sent later, so you'll receive it as a separate attachment. So everyone in approval of the minutes as submitted? With great thanks to Jamie, and welcome Emily.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
So we're now just
Evening.
going to quickly review the agenda. We've got a jam-packed agenda, and I will play the role again of doing my best to try to keep us on time, but still have plenty of time to have discussions with the aim of adjourning by 7:30. So there's an update on consolidation efforts of Conservation Commission and PMAC. We'll do some more work to really refine our goals for this, at least for this year and beyond. And then we've got some good new stuff to review, the conservation and open space map that Jamie will run through with us, that the town has put together, and an update on where we stand with the community action grants. And then we'll have additional updates before we conclude. Is there anything else anyone would like to add or highlight?
Is there going to be any discussion of the event coming up on the 23rd?
That might be part of the discussion item for community action grants. Yes.
Okay.
Great. Thanks. All right. There's been movement on Conservation Commission and PMAC consolidation, and I'll ask Jamie to update us.
Sure.
And it's been updated even since what you saw in the minutes.
Yep. So I was asked to attend last week's negotiations and appointments committee meeting to kind of walk the three counselors that sit on that committee through the process and the recommendation and answer some questions. I think the biggest hang up is that they just wanted confirmation that by integrating PMAC into Conservation Commission is not going to result in the pest management policy being applicable townwide, just not on town-owned properties. So we are an advisory committee. We don't set policy. And I shared that with them, and they still requested that we get a kind of feedback on that from the town attorney, which I did receive back today. He confirmed that, this group does not set policy, and we're essentially serving as a secondary committee to oversee the pest management policy. And then the pest management policy is very clear that it applies only to town-owned property. So that will be provided to the council. The next step is that this process or this recommendation is going to go before the Rules and Policy Committee next week. And for their kind of review and feedback. And then the plan as it stands right now is that it will go to the council for the first reading on March 2nd, and it will go for the second reading, public hearing, and vote on March 16th. So fingers crossed that that is how this process is now going to play out. Hopefully we don't have any other questions that have not already been answered through the multiple levels of review and discussion that we then need to address for the council. So that is my update.
Thank you very much, Jamie.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I just need a clarification on the former part of your statement. So are they saying members of this new commission have to agree that I'm a little bit confused. That we have to agree that we would never pursue that, or that the policy wouldn't change just because of PMAC becoming part of the Scarborough Conservation Commission?
Yeah, just that the policy is not going to change. It does not mean that
It can't change in the future.
It doesn't mean that we can't change it in the future. It just means nothing is going to change currently by making this this change.
Okay, understood. Thank you for that clarification.
In April?
Jamie is very humble and will not ever call attention to the level of work that she was doing, maneuvering that she was doing on Monday night. But she did it masterfully. So Jamie, thank you for trying to navigate that committee. They got hung up thinking that PMAC was an advisory committee and that Conservation Commission is somehow a judiciary committee, and that somehow giving the advisory powers of PMAC to Conservation Commission then gave Conservation Commission, unwielding power over pesticides or something. And so they did ask for clarification. I'm glad to hear that you already have that, Jamie, and that is, we knew that was going to be fine. And I'm on Rules and Policy. And so I have signaled to the rest of the council that I fully intend to make a motion to make a recommendation to the full council that this gets approved. And so hopefully Rules and Policy is the last committee action step that this needs to take. And I also, if the tone is good, I may make a motion that we combine first reading, second reading, and public hearing and get this taken care of.
Yeah.
So it's the way it was explained to me is that because it technically is an ordinance change, it has to go through 2 meetings.
Okay.
So
Don's a scholar and he knows better than I do. So we were hoping that if it came, because not all committee recommendations have to go to first and second, but if Don has already signaled that that's important to him, then we're probably not going to get around that.
I mean, at this point, 6 of the 7 counselors will have seen this recommendation. So
yeah,
you would hope that it's going to move forward without too much difficulty.
Agreed. Thank you,
So
Jamie.
How many more months are we looking at now?
1 more.
One.
What?
Thanks,
that?
Jamie.
Whoa, wow.
Yes, thank you so much, Jamie. That was That was an excellent presentation, and your navigating the conversation was fantastic. A great lesson.
I very much agree. I was able to view the YouTube session, and Jamie, thank you so much for all of your very clear explanation of all of that and your patience. I'm still astounded at how much bureaucracy there is at the local level, I guess.
Yep, for sure.
Now, there was also discussion, sort of open acknowledgement about our hopes of having Marla and Rita join the commission. So that's, as far as I know, still what we intend and will happen. We can't force it to happen, but that's what our intention is. We've been making that clear all along. And then I guess the only open question I have is, since the public meeting or the second reading and public hearing would be on the 16th of March, I think we meet on the 14th. So how does that overlap with any open business that PMAC would have with the town? Can it wait until April? Do we need to, I mean, are Marla and Rita needing to work with the town before then?
Todd and I have been having discussions, Todd, Susan, and I, and he was going to check in with the timing of their maintenance plans for the summer to see when those were expected from the town's contractor, and if they anticipate requesting a waiver this year. If there's no waiver request, then he feels comfortable holding off until this consolidation process is complete. If there is a waiver request coming forward that needs to be weighed in on, they'll have to figure out the timing of that and determine if PMAC needs to reconvene before this process is done.
Okay, great. Thanks. Any other comments or questions on that item? Okay, good. Thanks again, everyone. Another meeting, and then hopefully in April will be a larger body, or we will have a full body, I suppose. And so on the second item under old business is our goals. So last meeting, we took a look at the spreadsheet that outlined the comprehensive plan goals, how they might align with what we're up to. We talked about Pete's excellent work of an overlay with zoning or zones for enforcement of different pieces. And then we also brought up the fact that we wanted this commission to review existing ordinances. So I want to talk about that, sort of maybe talk about how we might split up that work or get that work done so we know what we're dealing with. Also raised in last meeting was the strong desire to balance development and land conservation. It is in our comprehensive plan, the town's comprehensive plan, vision number 1. And, I think we're all very aware it's an ongoing issue in the town, additional growth and development. What is the role of the Conservation Commission and land conservation in particular as it relates to this development? So I think highlighting that piece is becoming more and more important for me and for us. And then there was an open question for Jamie about the status of the Eastern Trail Gap project that came from last meeting. So what I'd like to open it up and hear your all's reflections from last meeting, anything new that you've brought forward to this meeting. But I'm seeing big buckets around, the obvious buckets around land conservation, land protection, and how we can look at these big goals and chunk them out into feasible pieces that we can feel like we've made an impact and done some movement on, at least in this year, looking towards future years. Maybe just quick, Jamie, do you have an update from the last meeting?
From Eastern Trail?
Yes.
Yeah, so I did some checking with other folks in town, and the December 31st deadline was kind of a soft deadline, that self-imposed deadline, I should say, that the town put on this process to get it moving forward. And that was set back in July, and with the belief that we would have all of the easements that we needed wrapped up and be able to get the process out to bid by the end of the year. Unfortunately, the easements are taking longer than we had anticipated. But the town's been communicating with DOT, who is the major funder, and keeping them apprised of the issues that we've been having. We have given the consultant that we're working with the go-ahead to start pulling together the bid documents. So as soon as the easements are in hand, the town can get that out to bid, so that the hope is still for construction to happen the summer of 2020. I do not know, unfortunately, the current status of the easement process, but it's my understanding that the funding for the project isn't in jeopardy just because we didn't hit our goal of getting it out to bid by the end of the year.
Good. Okay. So open discussion that gets us closer to defining some goals. And then I'll just open it up to ask, are these too broad of buckets that incorporate all the different pieces that I've heard brought up? Where we have land conservation that would include open space planning, the role of conservation and development, and then land protection, which would include pesticide review of pesticides use, setbacks, buffers, and elevation. Would categorizing these two in these ways work for this group? I'm seeing Emily's head nod. Is that a good way of sort of wrapping that up into two big buckets, and then we can begin to look at our existing ordinances?
I actually really like the two big buckets, Randy, because it gives us focus, but they're broad enough that then we can work within them. So the two big buckets give us a theme basically for probably 5 years out, right? I mean, it's not going to all happen this year. But then underneath each of those buckets, we can come up with really actionable items and tackle those while still like working towards our overarching theme. So I personally like having big buckets to work under, and those two make a lot of sense.
Thank you. And I see Pete's hand up, but just a quick comment. It would also be a way of communicating and educating people that we encounter what we're up to and what our purpose is, sort of reinforcing that that we exist to support efforts to protect and conserve land in Scarborough. And these are the ways that we're focusing on these pieces in this year and the next 5 years. Pete?
Yeah, I was wondering if there were already plans at the town level to open up ordinances for any changes associated with comprehensive plan recommendations for other purposes. The reason I ask is I know it takes time to open up ordinances and suggest changes and recommendations. And if these, if the research and work that the Conservation Commission does in relation to resiliency, of course, we're tying a lot of this back to the comprehensive plan, is done, then I'd like to know if other ordinance changes are being proposed as well at the same time to streamline things or kind of package things into a larger effort. So I guess that's a question more for Jamie. And then I guess the latter question is, what do we really feel like the appetite for some of these changes are at the town level? Because we don't want to bang our heads against the wall if the wall's not going to move. And that ties back to my first question. Thanks.
So I think that there's acknowledgement that ordinances are going to be updated, especially because of the comp plan and then other efforts that may be underway. I'm thinking specifically about our the new stormwater permit that's coming online in July. I will say it does seem like the ordinance committee, I don't know that they're going to want to take on a ton of changes all at once. I think that they would, unless they're very closely related. So I think that they would prefer to see discrete changes happen over time. And I think that, and Eric, I know you're super new, so I don't know if you want to chime in terms of town ordinances, if you feel comfortable doing that. But it's just been my experience with the ordinance committee that that they take a lot of time and are very thoughtful, considering all of the different possible implications of ordinance changes, and doing a lot all at once doesn't seem like a process that they would be comfortable with, because they're going to look at it from several different angles.
Yeah, I understand that. I guess I didn't phrase my question right. I guess my question should have been, do we know if any ordinances associated with the ones that we might be proposing changes to are already going to be visited as part of the comp plan update process? Therefore, it's the opportunity to work under the existing umbrella of existing ordinance changes that have already been identified.
I mean, sorry for my misunderstanding. So the primary change that would happen is probably with our zoning ordinance, and our zoning ordinance is 400 plus pages. So, I mean, there are updates on a regular basis to different sections of that ordinance based on kind of what is needed in the community. So I would say that, yeah, the zoning ordinance is going to be updated. I don't know of any plans right now outside of trying to incorporate, or the sustainability committee is proposing incorporation of EV charging requirements, and that will be a change to the zoning ordinance. But that's going to be a huge change, because that is going to be a whole addition to that ordinance, as opposed to, just tweaking language here and there. So it's a big process. Ordinance
I have
changes are
one last, and then I'll shut up and then give other folks an opportunity. I know it was from Scarborough that LD 1809, which was a bill to allow raising of certain structures
in the shoreline zone,
to changes for shoreline zoning. I'm wondering if that is an opportunity to revisit Scarborough's own floodplain management ordinance. Anyway, so I'm just wondering about the opportunities there.
I think that may be, especially because our shoreline zoning and floodplain management ordinance will need to change following the state rules changing. And that would be a conversation to have with Brian Longstaff, since he's our floodplain administrator, and oversees the implementation of our shoreline zoning ordinance.
Okay, great. So there will be an opportunity possibly. Awesome. Thanks.
Eric, for a moment you came off mute. I don't know if you were hoping to weigh in here, and welcome to your first Conservation Commission meeting.
Thank you. Just, I guess in short, my first thought when Pete asked that was to kind of look at the more broad spreadsheet that the town has. I don't know if I have the full one, but I have the one that the Long Range Planning Committee used to actually kind of assign these tasks to different groups in town. So maybe if I can go back and find that, I can get an idea of if there's other ordinances that other committees are getting tasked with reviewing. as part of the comp plan implementation. So that's certainly something I can circle back with you folks.
That'd
Yeah,
be good.
and related to that, let me just say that as of like 4 o'clock this afternoon, I just received the action plan and the items that the long range planning committee had kind of called out as being related to Conservation Commission from the comp plan. So they kind of went through a process similar to what Randy had done with the visions and the goals in the comp plan, and identified which items would be most closely related to Conservation Commission. I think that theirs went a little bit more in depth because they are more intimate. They were more intimately involved with the comp plan. And actually, I had a quick check-in with Jay Chase, our planning director, earlier this afternoon, saying, so this is how you read this chart. And it says like the vision category and the recommendation number. And then there's a page number associated in the plan where you actually should go and read what it says, because they're just kind of taking the high level ideas without any of the context. So it's really important to go back into the comp plan and read the context. And so I will share that with the group. Like I said, I just got it at 4 o'clock this afternoon, so I didn't send it out to you all. But I will say that over the past couple weeks, in terms of our goal setting, over the past couple weeks, there has been a lot of talk in the planning office about pulling together a proposal and a budget to develop a climate action plan, and tasking or asking this group if they would be interested in working to kind of come up with a scope of work and a budget work over the next, I guess, 10 months, 11 months at this point, so that the planning department can put that in their capital improvement plan for fiscal year 2024 through that budgeting process. And we also have the opportunity to host a Resilience Corps member. So it's part of the AmeriCorps process, or AmeriCorps program, coordinated through the Greater Portland Council of Governments. And it's recent graduates who are interested in working in the sustainability field that they place with host sites. And so we may have the opportunity to bring someone on board to help with that process, and help guide us through the process of identifying kind of the committees and the folks in town that we need to be working with, and helping us pull together the budget so that the town knows how much to, or the planning department knows how much to include in their 2024 capital improvement plan, in order for us to really take a meaningful look at where the town is and where we want to be in terms of climate change and resiliency. So I'm putting that out there. I know it's kind of a wrench in the works based on the discussion that we had at last meeting and this meeting. But this is really the first time that I've had folks from the department come and say, okay, we're ready. This is what we need to be working on. It's the words climate action plan never appear in our comprehensive plan, but there's a whole lot of hazard mitigation and resiliency planning that's mentioned in there. And those two things taken together would essentially, those tasks would be kind of pulled together into a climate action plan supported by the comp plan.
That's good news, hopeful news. And I think what Pete's bringing up, the planning group and the climate action plan helps us to pretty much refine our goals and align them to what is already happening or is starting to bubble up in the town. So we can start to focus our efforts in that same way. And then again, the work of SMPDC and GPCOG that we've had interactions with and we're working with can relate to this work as well. That seems like a good step. Pete.
On the Thanks for bringing up GPCOG and SMPDC, Randy. And I guess this is a question for Jamie and Eric. Has the town identified kind of like what help or what efforts we are trying to get out of both of those different grant opportunities, or partnerships, I guess you could say, associated with their grant opportunities? And how does our work fit into potentially that?
So I think that that the work that they're doing would be essentially what I'm seeing that is they're identifying our potential coastal hazards and providing some guidance on how those hazards should be addressed. Because it is for the entire southern coastline of Maine, I think that it's not necessarily going to give us all of the information that we need as a town in order to move forward. So I think it's on par, from my perspective, it's on par with like the SLOG, the Sea Level Rise working group from 10 or so years ago. It's identifying areas where that we need to address, and maybe providing some general recommendations. But from where staff is coming from, we need a lot more information pulled together so that we have actionable items coming out of those planning efforts. And I think that those planning efforts would fit into a climate action and resiliency plan. But that plan, if the town were to move forward with it, would be very specific to the town of Scarborough and would hopefully provide us with very actionable items and cost estimates and prioritizations. And we need to do this step before we do this step. And these things can happen concurrently and things like that. So what I see is those efforts will feed into a larger effort that Scarborough really should be undertaking in order for town leadership to move forward on some of these things. I think the information that we have is good. It's identifying our weak spots and our vulnerabilities, but it's not necessarily getting us to the next step, which is going to be action.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We've developed data and developed data and developed data, but never acted. So just want to make sure that we go down the path of action finally, as opposed to.
And I did bring that up to staff. I'm like, so we've done a lot of plans, and they're like, but they've all been they haven't been specific enough for us to actually, you know, the plans have identified more planning that needs to happen. So, okay, let's take this next step. Let's do that big planning step, but make sure that the outcomes are actionable and not just more plans.
Agreed. Great point. Thanks.
And one thing that I think would kind of benefit the town from working with GPCOG and SMPDC. For those of you who don't know, I actually used to work for SMPDC. I was a planner there before I came to Scarborough. So those folks work in, well, SMPDC is 39 towns. I think GPCOG is 20 something. So you got staff that's working in 60 towns across southern and sort of central Maine. Chances are, if there's an action item that we want to pursue or something that we're thinking about, they're going to know someone who's tried it, who knows someone who's tried it. So they're, I mean, as Jamie will probably tell you, they're a great resource to try, and you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel for everything, but it's certainly a good resource.
To hear, thank you. Noah, Emily, and Chuck. Just wondering if you have thoughts to share, places that you want to prioritize.
I just want to mention too that I think that the concept that Pete laid out at the last meeting, I think that can certainly be part of the climate action planning and resiliency planning process, because I think that is a good framework for us to be looking at. I think that having the plan in place will help us get to that ultimate end result, and maybe identify other things that we should be thinking about along the way.
Great.
So, sorry, Randy, you're asking about our thoughts on
Goals generally.
participating in the climate action plan process, or
Goals generally. whether it's the climate action plan process or this is our, it's just an open session on what you think about our goals for the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, well, I guess, Jamie, I mean, I think it's great that there's a desire from the folks who really work in the nuts and bolts of the town to have a climate action plan. That's wonderful news. I also know that there's a million climate action plans all around us, from communities all around us and institutions all around us. And so it shouldn't be reinventing the wheel in a lot of respects. So I think that's really fantastic and welcoming news. Truthfully, from my perspective in this conversation, I have had a hard time focusing away from the map, the GIS map that Jamie helped procure. I've spent a lot of time looking at it, thinking about it, had a number of conversations about it. I don't know if now is the time in our meeting for us to talk about that map or
Let's
not.
wait until we wrap the goals conversation up. We feel we're ready to move on. Thank you,
Sure.
Noah.
Sure. Yep. Sorry.
Noah, it sounds like you're really focused on the open space / preservation of open land concept as one of our goals.
I am, but there's many routes. There's many routes to that avenue, right? To get there. And I think about it in a lot of perspectives. Like, for example, Jamie giving us that update about the Eastern Trail. I had questions for her today about the downs and land conservation. And one of my first questions from that was, well, is there a formal plan to connect the downs as a bikeway to the Eastern Trail? And to me, I put that under the same umbrella as sort of land conservation, that kind of mobility and recreational use in space. So I just don't know that that's like a single bin. Those kinds of connectivity issues are a single bin. Yeah.
I just want to, very generally speaking, make sure that there's a balance with for mitigation and adaptation. I think the two of them actually construct resiliency. I think that there's a lot of room for transportation activity, and certainly the state plan of the big goals that we were looking at, items A through H, include much mitigation. And so aside from a solar farm here and there, what kind of mitigation? Obviously land conservation is mitigation, but not emissions reduction. I'd just like to see a healthy portion of that as well. I think that's not too easy to do. I mean, then that's the Sustainability Committee's job, but I want to overlook it.
Thank you, Chuck.
So I'm very much in agreement with our direction. I think we need more actionable items, and I'm assuming, Randy, we're going to get there, right? So I feel we're really good with what we have. I'm very supportive of the direction, the larger buckets. I think now the question is, okay, what is the next step to come up with the actionable things that we want to get to this year? And I'm thrilled that the town is interested in a climate action plan. I think that's really promising. And I think we should pull that in. So my question is, I'm good. I like all of this. How do we get to something that we can actually act on now? And I'm not, that's a hypothetical, like that's not intended to be answered right this minute.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it would be really helpful if we start working on actions and clear, defined goals, so that our next meeting is not more goal setting. Marla came off mute, and I'm glad because I also wanted to ask Marla and Rita for their thoughts.
Okay, sorry, I just have my little guys here, but I wanted to say, you know, kudos to you all for working on this planning document, and it blows my mind, all the things that you have been considering and what you want to work on. And when I look at this, I really think, okay, you know, where do you start? And part of my question is, what is the role and responsibility of the Conservation Commission versus the role of the town staff? Because I don't exactly know where that delineation is, and maybe you all can help me with that, because I think a lot of this information is something that you would have to get from the town anyway. Am I right? Am I wrong about this? I don't know. It just seems that town staff would have to be really, really involved. And is there the people to do it, the time to do it, the interest for them to do it? I'm not sure. It's just, I'm new to this commission and the process and everything. So I'm just, from somebody coming from sort of outside, I'm wondering how do you really start working on these issues with? So yeah, that's sort of my question. But I think it's amazing. I think everything you're doing is great, and these are all important issues, of course. And you know, and I hope to help and contribute with that, you know, to your goals. So thank you. Okay.
So I'll lend some insight into kind of the relationship between the commission and town staff, since I'm the primary liaison to the commission. I do have, I have to say, y'all hold me accountable. You make sure, you know, you come up with the ideas, and, you know, we meet every month, and I report out on those. So you're making sure that, or you're helping me ensure that progress is being made on those. And just to use the example of the climate action plan, there needs to be a champion for this. And having a committee behind it, and probably multiple committees, because there's going to be roles for the sustainability committee and the transportation committee and the housing alliance and all of that. They're all going to and others are all going to have their piece and have to contribute information. But really, it's whatever group is the champion of that effort is the group that gets to have a larger say in the decision-making process. And that's not to say that, you know, Tom Hall and the council and our various departments are going to weigh in, and they have to, the council ultimately has to approve of the plan that comes up. But whoever champions this effort is really going to be playing a large role in the direction in which it goes. So I think also you all as residents of Scarborough, you have a vested interest in the town and the well-being of the town. You have the local knowledge. I'm not from Scarborough. I don't live in Scarborough. So I rely a lot on you all to provide input and guidance on the efforts that either I bring to you or you ask me to work on behalf of the commission. And so the information and insight that you provide is invaluable to the work that I'm charged with doing for the town.
Now, I might add that I think it was at the Maine Conservation Commission conference that we heard that the Conservation Commission acts as the environmental conscience of a town or a municipality. So that's sort of how I believe we approach this, both being holding us accountable, championing efforts, and urging on critical efforts for the town. We've already said at the top of the meeting, we don't set policy. We can't make anything happen, but we can certainly identify priorities. And then what I'm hearing in the conversation that's happened in the last 15 minutes or so is where's current efforts on staff that are going in the direction that we would also want to go, and how can we provide some wind to boost that work? Thanks for the question, Marla. Rita, did you have anything you wanted to add at this point?
Really, just in general, I agree with Marla. I am very heartened and impressed with the broad issues that you are trying to deal with and trying to identify and work on. I, like Marla, very interested to know the best way for commission members to work with the town and others, not having to reinvent the wheel, as several have pointed out, to really bring us to some action. I'm always very much in favor of actionable items and making sure that we really do make a difference and just don't continue to study things. So I'm very very heartened by the whole direction of this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. Hearty agreement on getting action underway. I think it's important that we align on what those goals are, so that when we begin to take action, we are completely focused on those pieces, and try not to take on too much, but also acknowledge that when we're taking action, it might take some time. So let's get to those items by next month, and have some more conversation, perhaps in between, or ideas floating to get us there. Does that sound good to everyone?
Pete has his hand up also.
Oh, excuse me, Pete, thanks.
Yeah, I just have a quick last thought. Does it make any sense to, and this is unfortunately work for staff, but does it make any sense to identify, and it's already partly done through our comprehensive plan, but does it make sense for staff to identify those ordinances that would need to undergo some changes? Just identify the ordinances, not at this point, not anything more specific, to kind of get at the goals that we're talking about here. And I'm heartened to hear that there's interest in a climate action plan. Going back to what Jamie said earlier, I don't want us to just be doing another plan and not actually doing anything about it. If we have opportunities to make some changes now, maybe it makes sense to identify what some of those changes might be prior to even going through a climate action planning process, which is going to be a multiple year process. We've already identified a lot in our comprehensive plan that has specific recommendations and actions that I think we potentially could act on. And that's the last thing I wanted to say on that.
Jamie, is it your opinion that it's a multiple year process, given that we have, GPCOG's models to use and so much information gathered that can relate right to the model, and we've got the main won't wait, the criteria in that. Does it necessarily have to take that long?
I think it's at least a 1-year process, and possibly more, depending on the state of the data that the town currently has and what needs to be collected and analyzed. So we would go through, we've mentioned briefly a greenhouse gas inventory. That's going to take a long time. I'll give you an example. The town has probably at least 50, if not more, CMP bills. So all of those bills need to be reviewed and analyzed as part of a greenhouse gas inventory. And that is just to look at our electric usage. That doesn't include heating and transportation and things like that. So, and that's just for the town. And then if we want to pull in, look at models for private industry and residential usage and things like that, that will take more time. So we are probably looking at a pretty extensive process to pull together all of the information, understand it, and distill it down into actionable items as a result of the analysis of all of that information.
Okay, good clarification that the climate action plan is for the town of Scarborough as an administrative unit, not the town of Scarborough as a place where we all live, work, and play. So there's a good distinction for us to be mindful of.
Is that really? I didn't. That's brand new idea for me. That isn't the case in Portland, is it?
Portland's does extend to the private sector as well. So and they have had requirements. Portland and South Portland both, I believe, have had requirements where businesses have to report their annual energy usage to the municipality, and that again fed into their climate action planning process. Scarborough doesn't have that requirement, so we would be looking at national models because to get a good understanding of, and we're talking just greenhouse gases right now, of the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with Scarborough as a town, as a community, not just the administrative unit of the town of Scarborough. So we would probably choose to take a holistic look. There are, like I said, there are models out there to help us figure out based on land use and industry and travel patterns in town, give us a rough estimate of the greenhouse gas emissions associated with the private sector and transit and travel and all of that. And that information would likely be pulled into a climate action plan for the town of Scarborough, because I think in order to have a meaningful document and make meaningful change, it's going to be a community-wide effort, not just the town of Scarborough making changes to what we can control. We'll be looking for the community to play a role also.
Thank you. Otherwise, we'd be duplicating what the PMAC ran into, which everybody thinks is too insignificant. Right idea, but it needs to be much grander scale.
So I think this is a good time to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the draft conservation and open space map. And thanks, Noah, for bringing that up as your focus, especially on relating to our goals. So we'll have more conversation about that. But maybe we can start with Jamie giving us an overview.
Sure, I'm going to share the screen. So this is the map that you all received in the meeting packet. This has gone through several different iterations, and it keeps getting refined. And I think that there are more edits that will be made to this. And I can zoom into different areas, but for right now, I'll just kind of give you an overview. So we were able to tease out from the map the different kind of land uses of town-owned land. So what's represented here in the darker blue color are just parks and open space that are owned by the town of Scarborough. State and federal lands have been combined into one. So that's largely like the Scarborough Marsh and the Rachel Carson Preserve. Scarborough Land Trust lands are called out, and Noah asked us to add the new parcels, the newly obtained parcels along Payne Road and in conjunction with Warren Woods. So those were added in the updated version that you received later last week. Privately conserved land, that is land with conservation easements with Maine Farmland Trust. So there may be, and so that's the pinkish color on the map. So there may be additional parcels that may be conserved through other organizations that can be added to that, but we just pulled in the Maine Farmland Trust parcels there. And then the homeowners association, that is designated open space associated with development. It's not necessarily conserved, but it was when the development plans were approved, it was designated as open space. And again, we may be adding to that based on information that we're able to pull out of, or that our assessing department is able to pull out and provide to us. They're still working on it. Hopefully, I think that their timeframe was end of this week or early next week to have an update for us on that. And then there is no conservation or open space land associated with the downs represented on this map. And the downs have said a number of different things in terms of their conservation and open space since kind of the proposal for the development has first came forward back in 2018. So initially, the number was 40% of the downs 500 acres was going to be conserved. And that was back in 2018. So I don't know if that is still their plan moving forward. And then also they had said that there is approximately 55 acres adjacent to Warren Woods that they were planning to maintain as open space. But again, that it's been a while since they've put that number out there. So I don't know if that information has changed. I did check in with our town engineer and our planning director, but didn't get any information back from them in time for this meeting. Just wanted to put that information out there. So based on this, it looks like there's just over 6,300 acres of Scarborough either conserved or in open space, which is, I think, roughly 11 or 14% of town. So if we want to hit that 30% threshold, we've got a little bit more work to do. But again, there is, we may be updating this map again. Once it's in a format that we're comfortable with, this will become like a live map on as part of the town's web GIS, where we'll be able to turn layers on and off and whatnot. But kind of this is the current draft that we're working on. Pete, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. The town-owned properties necessarily isn't in conservation.
Right.
And maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, I don't even remember now, the Conservation Commission did an analysis of, I think, 8 of those town-owned properties and made the recommendation that they be placed in conservation. I don't know what has happened with those properties since, but that might be a low-hanging fruit that we could go back to as a past activity and recommend that the town, working with the land trust or whoever else, place those properties into conservation. The big one I'm thinking of is the one directly adjacent to the marsh, almost in the center, but slightly to the right. Yeah, right there. That's off Hampton Circle. That's a huge parcel that's owned on both sides by, there should be another green thing on the north of that. I'm not sure why that's not there. But that's surrounded on both sides by federal land that's conserved. And it was a low-hanging fruit. It's all wetland. I mean, there's nothing really you can ever do with it. So there were a number of parcels we identified that could be placed in conservation easement sooner rather than later. So maybe that's something we could follow up on at some point.
If you have any of the information about that, I need to actually find where our old Conservation Commission files are. And actually, maybe I can find them on the website, on the Conservation Commission's page on the website. I'm not sure how far back those meeting minutes go.
Yeah, it was a report we pulled together for town council, so Jay probably knows where it is too.
Okay, I can ask Jay about that.
I'll take a look in my notes as well, see if I have it. But that might be something easy to check off that says, hey, you know, the commission, because we were tasked in our charter with looking at what to do with town-owned properties. And that's one of the things, a report we gave back to the council.
Great, that's good to know. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks.
Could we also request an update on where the Downs project is with 40% of its intention to put land in conservation?
Yep, I will.
Okay, thanks.
And I'm sure Eric will hold them to that or ask that question too when they come before planning board.
Thank you, Eric.
So in anticipating that question, I looked at their website earlier this afternoon, and it says 200 acres of green space and 10 miles of walking trails on their 520 some odd acres. But it's there's no descriptive information beyond that.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
Right. What is public and in conservation? What is private property for the development?
And green space is well and good, but if it's heavily managed green space, it's not really doing the same as conserved land. So
Absolutely. So like on this map, all of the schools are on here, and that's great to have that. But, the Wentworth building is, not serving as wildlife habitat, right?
Right.
There's ball fields and that's fantastic, but these are sort of two different things. So when I look at this map, to me, there's really amazing linear components to daydream about. I just see so much opportunity for conservation based on the landscape. Now, that's perhaps different than reality, right? So when I look at lines, I see lines of conservation. If there's a building or a house in the middle of that line, then inherently that's something that's not possible. But nevertheless, when you look at the landscape here of Scarborough, there is just massive opportunity for connecting conserved areas that currently exist. We have a lot of sort of larger parcels, so larger, let's say, meaning like 30 to 60 acres or what have you, that are on here or that are connected to other ones. And in the sort of the realm of conservation biology, connectivity and size is everything, right? Trying to maximize size with regular shape and trying to have clear linkages between those parcels. And that's true both from a wildlife and plant and ecosystem perspective and from a human use perspective. The ability to walk or ski or bike through a landscape without having to do the crossroads, it's just changes your appreciation of it, changes the wildlife's ability to move through a landscape as well in a safer manner. And this map really helps with that in a lot of ways. I'd imagine you can all probably see different lions when you look at some of this landscape here, right? There's a huge amount of opportunity, which I think is really exciting. And that opportunity can be drawn from lots of different ways. Like I brought up earlier, thinking about bike paths, as an open space. And, if we have, imagine hopefully in the next, 4 years, the Eastern Trail will be complete in Scarborough, right? And we'll have this unbelievable resource for people to be able to recreate from Bug Light Park to Saco on an off-road trail. How can we make that accessible to more and more people from their homes or their businesses, their place that they want to go off for lunch? How can we do that without having them have to get in their car first to go there? And this seems to show lots of opportunity based on, around that. And now's the time to do it, right? Now is the time to do it. As parcels are being sold very quickly in development, that opportunity is happening. The time is ripe for those discussions and that vision, the holistic vision for our community.
Thank you, Noah. Pete, you have had your hand up.
I'll put it down. Sorry.
Oh.
Nothing to say right now.
I
I agree with Noah.
also want to share that there has been discussion. The Turnpike Connector project is on there as on our agenda as an update. I mentioned this when we first kind of introduced this to this group. The Turnpike Authority has been purchasing land up in this area of town. And they've said in the past that they see their connector project as being a three-legged stool, essentially, to look at improving transportation east-west into Gorham, increasing efficiency, and hopefully having kind of the dedicated transit lines and whatnot, using that corridor, but then also opportunities for land conservation. So they have shared that they are buying parcels. They don't need parcels as large as what they're buying. So they may, and the town is hoping that they will be putting the land area that's not needed for their roads into conservation. So we may be filling in up here. Who knows what the route is going to look like, and how the road itself is going to cause disruption and disconnection. But hopefully we'll get some good parcels in the Red Brook watershed, which is an unimpaired stream in town, with some more land conservation, especially up in the headwaters for that stream. So there's that nugget also. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, unfortunately. I mean, I think ultimately the road will be good. 114 is a parking lot twice a day, 5 days a week. So in terms of carbon emissions, that's not good. So having a more efficient way to get people where they're already going will be good. Having additional land conservation in that area would be good. Again, it's another major road that's going to be slicing through our landscape, and that's not so good, but it's a trade-off, I suppose.
The road doesn't replace 114 or 22 in any way, right? It's not.
No, it's an addition.
Bigger road. Now, is it supposed to have fencing around it, or and passageways either under or over for wildlife?
We haven't seen any formalized plans yet, so we don't know.
So thank you, Noah, I think you're the one who asked for this, to see a map like this. Thank you, Jamie, for your time and efforts, in the town staff for pulling this together, and so that we could take a look at it tonight. And to just want to echo, to underscore what Noah had said, but also to raise that this is another opportunity for us to work with community partners who bring perspective, experience, and sort of additional energy on these connecting routes, and a new, more opportunity for us to work with more people in town who are aligned in this work. So any other thoughts on this before we move to the next item?
Yeah, Jamie, could you, when you have a chance, is it possible for you to mark on this map where the proposed highway is going to be, the connector?
We don't even know the route yet. That hasn't been released either.
Oh, okay. It's totally all right. Gotcha.
They had told the council that it would be the end of February when they thought they would release the route. They indicated to council that they had a pretty clear idea where it was going to be, but they weren't ready to share it. And when we pressed them a little further, they said end of February. So hopefully it will be soon.
And they do have, there's a little bit of information on the Maine Turnpike Authority's website. I can circulate the link to that. There's some frequently asked questions and ways that you can provide comment and things like that. but there's not a whole lot to comment on yet because this is really high level conceptual at this point, and very few details.
So Jamie, can you bring us up to date on community action grants?
Sure. So I mentioned briefly at our last meeting that I was exploring community action grants. So just to give you a little bit of an overview or reminder, so these are grants that are being offered from the Governor's Office of Planning, Innovation, in the Future. The acronym is GOPIF. And it's to help municipalities and tribal entities implement elements related to the Maine Won't Wait Climate Action Plan. So these are $5,000 to $50,000 grants. And as long as you are hitting one of 74 identified kind of tasks that are outlined in the climate action plan, the state isn't requiring any additional match. In order to qualify for the grants, towns and tribal entities need to take a number of steps. One is to do a self-evaluation. The second step is to hold a community meeting to get the public involved and get their input and feedback on the town's priorities and where we should be going. And the third item is to pass a council resolution. The first funding round for this grant proposals are due on March 22nd. So it's a very short turnaround time. We are about 95% done with the evaluation. We had a meeting, an internal meeting last week with various departments to get their input on the areas that the evaluation was asking us to provide information on. The community meeting next week is related to our eligibility for the climate action plan. Everyone in this meeting should have received an invitation to participate in that. We'll be going through the checklist or the self-evaluation. Kind of staff will provide an overview of the short-term and long-term, I suppose, priorities that we've identified, and asking for feedback from the community. Because there is such a short window for this first funding round, the town is looking for projects or a project that is kind of more developed and ready to go, because essentially between the public meeting and the due date is a month. So we're going to have a month to kind of pull together our application for funding. And I'll just share that the town is very interested in doing an in-depth study of Route 1 where it crosses Scarborough Marsh to get an understanding of what we need to be planning for in terms of sea level rise, and how do we keep that as a viable transportation corridor, evacuation route. It was probably the number one at-risk road identified through the work that the town did when we were participating in the sea level rise working group that I mentioned earlier this meeting, that those meetings were taking place about 8 or 10 years ago. So that is initially for this first application round, that's what the town is looking at for funding. $50,000 isn't going to get us a full study, but it's going to get us the seed money for the full study. And then the second funding round is in September, and so the feedback and information that we get from this meeting would be used to for future funding opportunities, including the next funding round for the climate action, or the climate, or the community action grants, excuse me. That is a quick overview. Noah, you have your hand up.
Yeah, two questions about that. I guess first, are these grants just for planning purposes, or can you apply for actual infrastructure?
No, you can do implementation, various implementation. If it meets one of the 74 kind of targets in Maine won't wait, there you don't have a match. Otherwise, the town would have to come up with 20% match. I will say, no matter what we apply for, I think the town will be contributing additional funding towards the projects, because $50,000, especially today, isn't going to get us very far. But I think it's enough to get us thinking about things that we should be looking at and focusing on and moving towards.
My second question is, do you have a laundry list of things that you want to propose, or are you looking for ideas that could be quickly written up in a month?
So I think, like I was saying, for this first opportunity, I think we're hoping that we can get community support to move forward with the Route 1 study. We can only apply for one grant per funding round. Okay. We could combine items if we wanted to kind of tick multiple off, but like I said, that $50,000 is kind of just going to get us going for the Route 1 study. So, but I think there was an info meeting a while back, and they were saying, just because you get a grant, you can't apply for more than one per funding round, but you can apply in every funding round. So we would be looking to apply again in September.
Okay, great. I think that's the key there, that you can only apply for one at a time.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Sounds good. The thought is to not all municipalities or groups are going to be in a position to apply this first funding round. So we're hoping, we'll have a better chance of getting funded by getting in the first funding round, but still planning to apply for future rounds as well.
Okay. I have an idea I'd like to float by you, but I can do that offline.
Yeah. And if you're able, and absolutely send me your ideas. If you're able to come to the the virtual community meeting a week from Wednesday, we'll be kind of getting public input and feedback there as well.
Thanks, Jamie.
And I will say that Randy and I chatted a bit about this, and Randy had asked me some really good questions, like, isn't DOT already looking at this? And they're not. So you would think it is such a major road. It is such an important, the Scarborough Marsh is the largest marsh in Maine. Obviously, the road is already flooding. I mean, we've got a video and photos of Public Works plowing seawater off of that road during the Martin Luther King storm just this year. But unfortunately, DOT, they're really focused on paving. And so they're really proactive and forward thinking in terms of their paving schedule, but in terms of upgrades and things like that, they haven't been as forward thinking there. And our town engineer came from Scarborough, or from Saco, before she started in Scarborough, and there was a bridge, an existing bridge that DOT needed to replace, and their policy was if people can go a different route that is 8 miles or less to bypass that bridge, then they're not going to spend the money to replace the bridge. So so I can only imagine what their reaction is going to be when we're like, we need a bridge here, because we need to, allow for increased tidal flows and things, if that's what the study says. And I'm basing that on information from a study that we did a few years ago on a much smaller road on the border of Scarborough and Cape Elizabeth, where we were going to need a bridge for this very small road. So it's just kind of the reality that we're looking at with the sea level rise projections, but then also the experiences that we're currently seeing on our roadways, our coastal roads. Pete?
I will say DOT did a pretty in-depth study maybe 4 or 5 years ago on Route 1 as part of a demonstration project for a cost-benefit analysis tool that they were looking at. I forget the acronym for it.
Oh yeah, that was
but
like the cat and mouse or something like that.
Trapped or something like that. It was called, yeah. I don't remember. But they basically ran the cost benefit, and it made no benefit for them to do anything other than continue paving. So they have run some pretty significant studies on it. That's not to say it shouldn't be updated, and I certainly think that it should be made into a causeway as opposed to what it is. But they definitely have looked at it in the past, so that's something we would want to find out and grab. And I think there was an additional study done separately by a consulting group on another cost benefit of doing something at Route 1. So
Thanks for that info. Yeah, and that has been their approach so far, has been to just continue paving it, building up with pavement, but the road's also sinking. So like it's heavy, and marsh soils are that's not a solution for a marsh. So and then with infrastructure funding, DOT is also going to be kind of putting together their list of priorities. We've started talking with them about this possibility of the town kind of leading an effort to study what needs to happen at that crossing, and getting it on their radar, so that hopefully they will add that into some of their resiliency planning and upgrades that they may be using or the infrastructure funding for. So we're talking with them. We're trying to get it on their radar, but it's kind of the situation here where they've got too many roads to take care of and too few resources. So it really does fall to the towns to be proactive and start working towards upgrades for on state roads.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, lightning round of updates. Want to just go down the list. April, do you have anything more that you want to say about the Turnpike? Nope.
Nope, nothing that I haven't already said, nothing new, so.
What about the town council?
Same, unless you guys have questions about council proceedings, we'll just keep our fingers crossed for this process to play out.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Anything from the planning board? We don't have a.
Well, we have Eric.
I could maybe speak to that. We don't really have anything terribly, as far as I'm aware, pertinent to the Conservation Commission. One thing I will say that kind of popped up in my mind during the conservation open space map discussion was that as I'm going through these development reviews, whether it be at the Downs or elsewhere, something I'm going to be looking for is either using this map that Jamie and our GIS person have been working on pretty diligently, or if one of you wants to volunteer to look at these projects as a almost departmental review, maybe Jamie would, I don't know, but certainly I think there are opportunities there to get more of a comprehensive review done. And I'm going to try my best to get trails connected where they're existing. And I don't think we can really sway anybody towards land conservation, but in terms of the planning board, I'm really going to try and bring your work to them and their work to you, and hopefully we can work together to keep Scarborough conserved.
Fantastic. That's good news. And I'm sure there's at least one or two of us who'd be happy to work with you, but we meet monthly too. So if the timing works for us to look at it, something once a month, we'd welcome that. Right. Sustainability committee?
Yeah, so Sustainability Committee will be, members will be participating in next week's meeting with their kind of climate action priorities. But the other item that I've mentioned that they're working on is the EV charging ordinance. They will be just introducing that to the ordinance committee at the end of this month, kind of setting the stage for why they're proposing an update to our zoning ordinance to require EV charging infrastructure during new development and redevelopment. So My intent is to just use that as an education session for the counselors on the ordinance committee who may not be aware or fully understand why we're proposing this for Scarborough. We did do a stakeholder meeting with commercial developers back in December, and providing a lot of the same information that we provided to the developers to the ordinance committee at that meeting, and just kind of introducing conceptually what we're looking for. I think that this is, like I had mentioned earlier, this is going to be a big change for our zoning ordinance. So it's going to go through, I think, several meetings with the ordinance committee in several different iterations before those folks are comfortable kind of moving it onto the council. So we're in it for the long haul with that one.
That is such important work. Thank you for doing it.
That's what I got.
Excellent. Good. I think we know what's going to be on next month's agenda. Jamie and I usually meet to set it. So if there's anything that you all want to add or make sure we prioritize for next month, in addition to what we've already noted, be in touch. Welcome, Eric. It's good to see you. Looking forward to continuing work with you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to working with you guys.
Wonderful. And I think we will take a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Excellent. All right.
Second.
Excellent. All right. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Take care.